And then can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, awesome. And also too, is everyone okay with Anne recording this? So if you don't want your face on the internet, I would probably turn off your cameras.
Oh no. Well, on my side, I'll just do speaker view, so no one's little face
Okay,
will be
yeah.
on.
Okay, that's good.
No worries, guys.
All right, you will not be, your faces will not be on the internet.
Yeah, you're good.
Don't worry. All right, yeah, so today what I want to talk about is kind of like a timely topic right now, given the current, state of events. What I want to talk about today is the onlineification of science, which is something that I termed. And specifically, what I want to do is talk about some of the ingredients that are needed in order to go from the physical lab to online. And this talk today is going to be a bit higher level. So I want to talk about the basic infrastructure, the terminology and tools that are associated with online data collection. If folks want kind of more, an in-depth look into online data collection, specifically how to actually build an experiment, then we could talk about that, privately. You can meet with me or DM me, and we could talk about that kind of one-on-one. That's not the purpose of this talk today. This is something that I think is new for everyone, so I don't really think it would be useful to talk about kind of the specifics of building experiments, and specifically because not a lot of you are going to want to build experiments for your own projects online. But yeah, so this is just kind of just a basic discussion on online data collection. It's been about a month now since we've been in quarantine. But about a couple months ago was business as usual in the lab. So this is my psychology humor coming out, but hopefully we weren't in the lab torturing people, but instead we were collecting eye tracking data and collecting EEG data, or whatever, or behavioral data, whatever you're doing. But that was the normal life for us in the lab, was just being able to collect data, being in the physical lab. So life was good. And then disaster struck. The COVID-19 pandemic put a halt to all non-essential research. And that left us with two options. The first option is that we don't collect data, and that's no fun. I mean, I'm sure we all have data that needs to be analyzed and we have papers that need to be written, but I think that this meme kind of, accurately summarizes kind of our thoughts as scientists. We want to be collecting data. We want to test hypotheses. We want to test theories. We want to collect data. So the more favorable option is to start collecting data online. And as Bob Dylan once famously saying, the times, they are changing. So instead of bringing individuals into the physical lab, we can have individuals do experiments from the comforts of their home. So individuals can do experiments from their bed. Individuals can do experiments in the park as long as they're maintaining social distancing norms. And I don't know what this person in the bottom is doing, but he looks very distraught. He might have done isn't or maybe SFG, and he's really, really upset. But so the online data collection or doing experiments online is kind of a booming business right now. It is growing in popularity. It's what everyone is talking about on social media. And I have gotten so many invitations to give talks on online data collection. And I mean, even yesterday, In Young and I got an email from someone from Ruth's lab about online data collection. People are really interested in online data collection. They don't want to sit idly by and not do anything. They want to be able to collect data. So you might be asking yourself, what are some of the advantages of online data collection? Well, there are several advantages to collecting data online. The first advantage is that it's efficient. So in the lab, it might take us a semester, it might take us 2 semesters to actually collect data that we can then analyze and publish. When we collect data online, we can collect all the data that we need in a couple hours, a couple days, or a couple weeks. So that allows us to be able to, analyze the data and produce papers at a faster, higher rate. For instance, I collected some online data with some collaborators, and I was able to collect probably 250 participants, so all the data I needed for one experiment in a day. So we put it online in the morning, and by the midnight, the midnight of the next day, I had all the data I needed for experiment 1. So it's highly efficient. Online data collection is also economical. So in a physical lab, we have to hire lab managers and RAs. They need to schedule experiments, and we need people in the lab to actually physically run the experiment. So when participants come in or patients come in, we need to have someone there to run them through the experiment. With online data collection, you don't really need to do that. So you program the experiment, you put it up online, and you have the recruitment software, which I'll talk about later, send out those invitations or those reminders. So you don't need, physical bodies to actually run these experiments. And monetarily speaking, I think they could also be a little cheaper. So in our studies, for example, we pay people about $15 to come into the lab each time, give or take. That maybe that's a little more, a little less, depending on the experiment. Online, you don't have to pay them that $15. It would be nice to pay them around that price, but it's usually a little less than that. So it's about probably $9.50 an hour, maybe $8.50 an hour. It depends. You obviously want to pay people online a reasonable wage, but it can save money in the long run. So it might come as a surprise to some of you, but the typical population that we run experiments on are undergrad students, and they're really not that diverse. So in statistics or research methods, we talk about representative samples, and the undergrads that we have to participate in our experiments are not really representative of the population as a whole. And that's a big, big problem in science and research. With online data collection, you can actually get a better, more diverse sample. It's more representative of the population as a whole. And in statistical parlance or research parlance, we talk about weird populations. So online data collection allows us to recruit non-weird participants. And weird is not a personality characteristic. Instead, it's an acronym that means westernized, educated, democratic, industrialized. And this is kind of the typical makeup of our research samples for a lot of our experiments.
So Jason, I had one just quick question. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the online data collection, to what extent it is allowed to ask about the demographics of the participants? Like, can we ask like their like age, race, and like background, like education level, and like something like that, or even like some kind of socioeconomic status or something like that?
Yeah, no. So what's great about some of the platforms, the crowdsourcing platforms, so Prolific or MTurk, is that you can actually set criteria yourself. So let's say you want people that have a college, education. You can exclude people or include people based on that, religious orientation, age, sex, gender, or health status. Those are all things that you can choose to include or exclude out of your experiment. And you can also ask it internally. So if in your actual experiment proper, you can include those questions like we would do in the lab.
Right. And because you also experienced bringing this to IRB for their review,
Yeah.
and IRB, is it okay? I mean, like, are they happy with this type of like demographic questionnaire or screening in the online format, do you think?
Yep, there was no issues. I mean, it was a pretty streamlined process to where you were able to include it in an old IRB, and then they approved it within a week or two.
Okay.
So I mean, it's no different than what we would do in the lab. So we have demographic questions that we ask our participants. We ask them about their, health status, what, prescription drugs they're taking. Obviously, we wouldn't ask that online. But people really give that information, and then we can use that information to like include or exclude based on that.
Right. Sounds great. Thanks.
For sure. Mm-hmm. So there's something that I didn't look into, but it would be interesting in terms of the diversity point, in terms of reaching more niche populations. So I haven't looked into it, but we might be able to look at like, SSD folks or individuals with some type of hearing impairment. We might be able to like contact those people and get a lot of people and like run them through some of our tasks. And I don't know if we can do that or if we'd be able to, but I think that's one kind of positive of online data collection, or one aspect of it that would be worth pursuing, and in our lab specifically. But I haven't looked into that at all. And lastly, there's what's called a replication crisis in science, where results are not replicable. So you do an experiment, you publish that experiment, and then someone tries to replicate that experiment or do the same thing, and they don't find the same effect. And one reason that could be is due to small sample sizes, or there's not enough power. So online data collection allows us to increase the power of our experiments. So instead of collecting 20 people or 30 people, we can collect 500 people or 600 people. So online data collection allows us to increase the power of our studies, to make them more replicable, and hopefully people will be more willing to believe the effects that are being found. So hopefully maybe I've convinced you about online studies and why they are worth pursuing. So the question, or the million-dollar question, is how do we take those experiments that we're conducting in the lab and how do we adapt them and run them online? So what I want to do now is talk about these ingredients that are involved in this online recipe. And there's 3 main ingredients that you need to put an experiment online. So you need an experiment task builder, so you have to build that experiment. You have to host it somewhere on the internet. And you have to recruit participants. So these 3 ingredients I'm going to talk about in turn. So as it relates to experiments or task builders, so we use a lot of tools in the lab to build our experiments, right? So we use Experiment Builder, ePrime. Everyone should be familiar with Psych Toolbox. I think that's one of the main methods in the lab to build experiments. Sometimes people use PsychoPy. So these are all great tools to collect data in the lab. But most of these tools, unfortunately, are not portable. And what do I mean by portable? I mean that you can't just take a Psych Toolbox experiment and click a button and put it online. You can't do that. You can't navigate to the little eyeball Experiment Builder script and then just put that online. You can't do that. However, there are really great experiment or task builders that allow us to run experiments online through a web browser. So here I've listed some of those task builders or platforms that you can use to put your experiment online. So there's Open Sesame, there's PsychoPy, there's Gorilla, and Qualtrics. And I want to talk about some of these platforms. The platform that I want to talk about right now is Gorilla, and that's the one that I've been using, and I think the lab has predominantly been using, and I absolutely love Gorilla. I have nothing bad to say about Gorilla. And Gorilla is an all-in-one platform. So individuals can build their experiment, they can run their experiment, and host their experiment all within this platform. You don't need multiple platforms to run the experiment. And it's experiment or questionnaire builder. So sometimes you'll have to build a task in a platform, maybe PsychoPy, for instance. So you can build the task in there, but you can't build questionnaires in there. So what you have to do is you have to take the Python script and you have to link it to, let's say, Qualtrics, which is a questionnaire builder, which I'll talk about. So it can kind of get a little convoluted, a little messy, because you have multiple platforms talking to one another to build the experiment. With Gorilla, you don't need to do that. Gorilla is completely web-based, so you don't need to download any type of software onto your computer. Everything you can do from the web, so you can collaborate with folks, and it uses version control. So Inyong can go onto my experiment and make a change to anything. He can commit that change and say that, oh, I changed X, Y, and Z. And then I'm like, okay, and then I can change something and I can commit that. So it allows people to collaborate with one another on the experiment. So it's never the case where Inyong makes a change and I don't know about that change. And I go to, I implement it online and have people, I collect data for that. And then I find out that he changed the whole experiment. That's bad. So with this, it allows you to kind of have more collaboration. Huh? What was that?
I promise I won't do that.
Yeah, but I mean, it could happen. So like in the lab, right? So like when we're talking about Psych Toolbox, so like we run a script from like a completely different folder and it's not the right experiment. Hopefully this will solve that or circumvent that issue.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, and then Gorilla is just very simple and easy to use. So it uses a GUI, a graphical user interface, so you don't need to code. So this makes it really simple and easy for undergrads who don't know any coding, or even more early career researchers, or more grad students that know a little bit of coding. It's for everybody. And when I say graphical user interface, what I mean is that you can build your experiment graphically. You don't need to write any code or anything. A negative of Gorilla is that it's closed source, so you can't have access to kind of like the inner workings of the actual Gorilla platform. So that's kind of a bummer. And also too, it does cost money to collect data. So it's about $1.08 per participant, and that's on top of what you pay people to participate in your experiment. It's not that expensive, but it would be nice if it was just free, but that's not how the world works, unfortunately. People need to get paid. But what I do like about Gorilla is that it's free to build experiments. So you can build whatever you want, and you can collect data locally. And we did that when we were piloting the isn't validation. So I created the experiment, and then I asked all of you to send me to sign up for the Gorilla account, and I was able to add you as collaborators. And you were able to preview the task and then download the data and send that to me. So that allows you to kind of collect data locally, and you don't need to pay any people to do the experiment. So yeah, I think with anything, there's going to be negatives and positives, but I've just been really happy with Gorilla. And there's other platforms too. So another popular one is PsychoPy. This is just an experiment or task builder. With PsychoPy, you have to download PsychoPy onto your computer, and then you have to build the experiment. What's good about PsychoPy is that it is a GUI as well, or you can just code in Python, and you can kind of build up your experiment graphically. And what's great about this is that it's free and open source, so all the code is available, and you don't need to pay anything. And then probably one of the most well-known kind of, task.
Continue again, Jason. Can I just ask you one more question about PsychoPy? Actually, does PsychoPy has the recruitment platform as well as the payment platform, or is it just open source just to kind of implement the experiment?
So I will talk about that when I talk about it.
Okay, I wait.
Yes, getting ahead of me. So I don't know so how many of you have actually used Qualtrics in your classes or for some of your experiments? Have any one of you used Qualtrics before? It's kind of one of the most well-known platforms.
Yeah, so department, the CSD department actually often use this.
Yeah, it's usually included in department like a license where it's free. So University of Iowa bought a department license, so anyone can use it, and it's free. It's somewhat limited, but it's available for everyone, and I think it's one of the most common ones. So that's why I wanted to ask folks, and you can unmute your mic. Have any of you used Qualtrics before?
Yeah, I think I filled out a bunch of surveys for a bunch of university-based.
Yep. That is exactly what Qualtrics is for. It's pretty much just for surveys or questionnaires. You can do very simplified experiments on there. I've done some learning and memory experiments on there where you present just images and individuals do like a recognition or recall task at the end. But I want to kind of make this disclaimer. Don't use this if you care about timing or have a complex design. Do not use Qualtrics. It is not flexible at all. And it's just a pain. So yeah, I don't know why I'm talking about Qualtrics, but mostly because it's one of the most popular ones. But yeah, for cognitive scientists or audiologists that care about timing or have complex designs, like don't waste your time with Qualtrics. But if you just want to have people answer surveys or look at images or listen to sounds, you can use Qualtrics. But if you have something more complex, I wouldn't recommend it. All right, so I talked a little bit about some of the experiment or task builders that are available. So once you've created that experiment needs to be housed somewhere. You need to store it somewhere, so it can't live locally. So there are a couple options here. So you can host the source code for the experiment yourself, But that would mean you'd have to perform all the administration, you'd have to do all the data backup and security. And no one really has time for that, to do that. I know I don't. And I'm really not that, proficient with coding anyways, or, HTML or JavaScript. So I don't really want to do that. The more favorable option is to use a third-party hosting service, and there are kind of several that are available. One is Yatos, and this one is available. It's free. It requires a lot of technical skill, and it's mainly used by Open Sesame, which I didn't talk about, but it's very similar to PsychoPy. The other ones are more preferable. So one of the big ones is Pavlovia, and Pavlovia essentially is a kind of a hosting service for PsychoPy experiments. So this answers In-Young's question. So you would build the experiment in PsychoPy, and then you would convert it to JavaScript or whatever HTML language it converts it to, and then you would store it on Pavlovia. And this allows you to, this essentially hosts the experiment and allows individuals to participate in the experiment. This costs about 20 cents per participant. And then you can get a university license for $1,500, and this allows as many experiments as you want to run on Pavlovia. So you don't need to pay that 20 cents per person. You would just pay, you just buy the license, and you can run as many experiments as you like.
Got it. But then how do you pay the participants? If you
That's the next step.
Okay.
Yeah, so this basically is just hosting. So you're paying the service just for the hosting, so taking your source code and putting it on online.
Okay.
So Gorilla is the one that I use, and Gorilla, as I said, is kind of this all-in-one platform. And this service or this platform uses Microsoft Azure as its server. And this one also costs money. It's about $1.08 per participant, as I've said. And I'm not sure what the university license cost is. I would have to look into that. I don't know if we're going to pursue a university license for Gorilla, but maybe. And I think it would probably be comparable to Pavlovia, so $1,500 for a university license, which I don't think is prohibitively expensive, especially if we're going to have lots of people collecting data online. All right, so now we're going to get to In-Young's question. So now you've created the experiment, you have someplace to host it online. Now you need to get the participants for your study, and you need to pay them. So recruitment and payment platforms do two important things. So they get the studies distributed to participants, and they handle the money and credit. And I want to talk about kind of three of these major platforms. So Sona, Amazon MTurk, and Prolific. These are kind of the three major recruitment and payment platforms. So Sona Systems is primarily for educational purposes. So individuals in undergrad classes, they have a research requirement, and in order for them to get research credit, they need to participate in experiments. So as researchers, we can post our studies on Sona Systems, and they don't get money for participating, but instead they get credit. And I'm not sure, so me being from psychology, I have access to the Sona system, and I've used Sona for the entirety of my career. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with the Sona system. And I don't know if there's any research requirements in like audiology or CSD that require you to do Sona experiments.
No, CSD does not have this kind of, no.
Yeah, so this might be new to you, or you might not be familiar with this, but this is just strictly for educational purposes, and you get credit. Usually you don't get any money for this. The other two platforms are not credit-based, but they're money-based. So Amazon MTurk is probably one of the most popular ones. This started in 2005, and it has about 500,000 workers. They call their participants workers, and instead of having workers complete experiments, they complete what are called hits, which are human intelligence tasks. And Amazon MTurk allows you to screen participants, and I've talked about this, briefly before. So if you want a particular set of participants, or you want a particular population, you might only want individuals that didn't complete high school, or a particular political affiliation or religious orientation, you can do all that screening. And with MTurk, they have what are called super Turkers, where our individuals are professional experiment or task takers, and you can pay a little bit extra to have people that are really good doing experiments participate in your study. So again, you're allowed to screen participants. You can include who you want, or you can exclude who you want. And as I've said before, it is money-based, and it all depends on how much you want to pay them. There's really not, for Amazon MTurk at least, there's really not a set amount. So you can pay individuals, $1 for a 15-minute experiment, or you can pay them, $10 for an hour experiment. It varies. And what's really great about Amazon MTurk and also Prolific is that if you're not happy with the quality of their data, you don't have to pay them money. So they're motivated to perform the task at a high level. So if someone just stares at a screen or is at one page for 3 hours, you can reject them and you don't have to pay them. So that's great.
It sounds a little evil, but
Yeah, but a little evil. But what are you? I personally wouldn't want to pay someone $15 for doing a task for 2 minutes that's supposed to take an hour.
that's true.
I would pay them like $1 maybe, but I wouldn't pay them $15.
Yeah. So does that mean that we can also think about some kind of experimental design of giving them some kind of incentives based on their performance? Is it
Yeah.
possible? Okay.
So if you are really happy with their data,
Yeah.
they pass all the checks, they score high, you can give them a little extra money. You could give them an extra reward. So, participant X did really well. I'm going to pay him an extra $5.
Mm-hmm.
You can do that. So you can reward participants.
Okay. Sounds good.
So Amazon's little brother is Prolific. And Prolific started in 2016 and has a smaller population size. It's about 100,000. Predominantly users are from the UK, but there are many, many folks from the United States that are using this. And it's very similar to Amazon MTurk. There's just a list of experiments, and you can screen the participants to include and exclude whoever you'd like. And this one is also money-based, but what's different from Amazon MTurk is that they require you to at least pay the minimum wage. So $6 or $7 for every hour that they participate. So individuals are paid a little bit more money than Amazon MTurk, and it's been suggested that you get better quality data with Prolific because you're paying them more money, so individuals are more motivated to do well in your task or to perform at a higher level. So there's been some evidence or some studies that have come out to suggest that individuals participating in studies on Prolific are a little bit better than those same people on Amazon MTurk, for instance. So these are kind of the 3 basic recruitment platforms. So these again, you get the participants and they pay them. And it's very easy to link these things together. So to link your experiment on Gorilla to one of these recruitment platforms, it's very simple. There's essentially just a link that you copy and paste, and it essentially does all the data collection for you. So it keeps track of the participants that are in your experiment, and it pays those participants. This is an example of what it would look like on Gorilla. So basically you would just change the recruitment, and then you would just pick what system you're using. So if you're using Sona or Amazon MTurk, you just click on that, and then it generates a link for you, and you just copy and paste that link. And that is pretty much how you get up and running. So to kind of summarize everything, this is kind of the basic infrastructure of what I've talked about. So you as an experimenter have 2 roles or multiple roles. You want to create the experiment, so you have to create the experiment on Gorilla or PsychoPy, whatever you want to create it on, that can be put online. And then you have to advertise the experiment. And to do that, you have to put it on, Sona or MTurk or Prolific. And what they do is they recruit the participants, and the participants run your experiment from a server right here. And then the participants upload the results, and you as an experimenter download the results, and you analyze the data, and you write the papers. So this is kind of a nice kind of schematic of kind of the infrastructure of online data collection. So what I want to do now is talk about some of the frequently or commonly asked questions that individuals doing online data collection have. So these are kind of the common questions that I'm asked when individuals are really interested about putting their experiments online. So what I wanted to do is talk about a few of those questions. one question that I frequently get asked is, how good are the data? So what does the data quality look like? So can you get effects that you get in the lab? So the effects that you get in the lab, can you get those online? And the answer is, yeah, there's some evidence to suggest that you can get good data. And what I want to do is show you evidence from 3 studies that I've pulled from the internet. So one study is from Zwan et al. In 2018. And what Zwan et al. Did was they put multiple studies on mTurk. So they collected lots and lots of people on lots of different cognitive psychology tasks. So like the Simon task, Flinker task, spacing effect, false memories, et cetera, et cetera. And they had individuals come into the lab 2 times. The first time, they would be allocated to a particular task. So these numbers represent the experiment that they participated in. So 2 might represent Flinker task. So they came in 1 time and they were given the Flinker task. Then they came in a second time, and then they were either given the Flinker task with the same materials, so what they did the first session, or they were given the Flinker task with different materials, with different stimuli. And these represent the effect sizes from those 2 experiments. So effect size for wave 1 and effect size for wave 2. This line right here, anything lying on this line right here is, this means that the effect sizes are essentially the same. And this figure is reassuring. And it's reassuring because all these effect sizes lie really close to this dotted line right here. So what that means is that you can get the effects, so they're replicable online. And 2, they're reliable. So if individuals are coming back for the experiment, they essentially perform similarly, which are all good things that you'd want to see from an online experiment. So that's one piece of evidence. So this is data from a study I conducted a while ago. I was interested in desirable difficulties. So desirable difficulties are any type of technique that you use that makes learning initially harder, but it has the long-term benefits of making learning more durable, so you have better memory. And one of those techniques is generation. So the generation effect is a technique wherein if you generate something, so if you have to generate train here compared to just reading train, you actually have better memory for train that you generated than if you just simply read train. So this is called the generation effect. And we were able to replicate this online. And we can see this nice generation effect here, where individuals have better memory for the generation items than the regular simply read items. So again, we can replicate studies that we do in the lab. Now switching to a more auditory example, Slot and Strand in 2016 did a study where they compared lab experiments to Amazon mTurkers. And they were interested in speech and noise identification, and they were interested in auditory lexical decision. What I have pictured here are results from the speech and noise identification task. If you look at ID accuracy here, we see that individuals in the lab have greater accuracy. So they identify more words than individuals on mTurk. So, I mean, that's a little disconcerting, but when we look at the correlation between the 2, we see that there's a high positive correlation here between the 2. So we see that we can get, nice positive correlation. We can get consistency between lab experiments and online experiments. I mean, it would make sense that in the lab, accuracy is higher because you have a more controlled environment. But we can see that even online, you can still get, reasonable results in the auditory domain. So are there any questions so far from folks?
Oh, this looked great.
I can't see anyone, so I don't know if anyone's messaging me. So it's been recommended that if you want to get good quality data online, you should keep your experiments brief, fun, and the instructions easy to understand. A lot of the folks that are participating in your experiments online are not undergrads. They've never taken a psychology class before. They've never taken, they literally are just, living their day-to-day lives, and they're just doing these studies to make a little extra money. So it's important that you have to make the instructions easy to understand and brief and fun. One of Bob's students, Samantha, is doing a training paradigm online, and she's not having really great results. So individuals are actually leaving her experiments early because they don't want to do the trials anymore. So I met with her yesterday. So she has like this training paradigm where they're listening to all these sounds. In some of her trials, she has a little button that says you can exit the experiment. So individuals are exiting the experiment after like 4 minutes. So she's getting all, bad data. She's not getting complete data sets. So that would be an example of an experiment that might need to be changed to make it a little bit more brief and also more fun for the individuals. But yeah, no, the people are not going to want to do, a 3-hour task of pressing buttons or SFG or whatever. They don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess one of the most frequently asked questions I get is, how good is the timing online? So what's the precision? So me as a cognitive scientist, I want to be able to present stimuli and collect responses at millisecond or sub-millisecond with sub-millisecond or millisecond precision. So how good is the timing? How precise is it? And unfortunately, there's not really a good answer to this. My answer to this is that timing is reasonable. You're not going to get the timing precision that you get in the lab. That's just not going to happen. But we can look at some data. So this is a preprint from Anwar Irvine's group. They actually work with Gorilla. And they released a study a couple months ago, it's a preprint now, where they looked at timing precision for a couple different scenarios. They looked at reaction time delay. So when you press a button, what's the delay until the program registers that, and also visual delay. So when you present a stimuli for a certain amount of time, so 100 milliseconds or 200 milliseconds, like what's the lag of when that actual stimulus is presented on the screen and it registers? So what they did is they looked at different browsers and different operating systems, as well as different kind of platforms. So we talked about Gorilla today. And we can see here for RT delay, so for Gorilla at least, it's about 80 milliseconds, which is not the greatest, especially if you're trying to, get a 10 milliseconds difference between a group. But for the things that we're doing here in the lab, I think that 80 milliseconds is okay. It's not great. It's not horrible either. Some platforms have better RT registration, but it's not horrible. And what we see here is that between operating systems, so Windows and Mac, they're pretty similar. So if this is Windows, if we look at Mac, again, we see on Mac across all the browsers, it's about 80 milliseconds, at least for Gorilla. There's another preprint that I didn't talk about. It came out the same time as this one, and their results are a little bit more reasonable. They're saying that the reaction time delay is maybe like 10 milliseconds. So it's okay, especially when we're talking about reaction time. When we're talking about visual delay, so when things are presented for 100 milliseconds or 200 milliseconds, these figures are a little bit better. These numbers are a little bit better. So for Gorilla, at least, it's about, 25 milliseconds. For some other platforms, it's about 10 milliseconds. And it's pretty consistent between Windows and Mac. So when you want to present a stimulus for a short duration, it seems like you can, and there's only kind of a brief delay. Having said that, I probably wouldn't be displaying things for 50 milliseconds or 40 milliseconds online, just given the variability. There's been some mass priming studies that have been done online, and they suggest that if you're going to present something below 50 milliseconds, you're not going to be able to get replicable results, or you're not going to get anything meaningful. So what I don't have depicted here, so the other preprint that I talked about, it's called the mega timing study, and they actually looked at auditory and visual presentations. So this is when audio and visual stimuli are linked together. And those results are not great, to say the least. So when you want to pair audio and visual together, the delays or the lag could be up to 200 milliseconds. So it could be that the visual display comes on before the audio, or audio comes on before the visual display. And that could be, on average, there could be a 200 millisecond delay. So what I've recommended is that if you want to sync audio and visual together, I probably wouldn't do this online. I think that there's too much variability in that. So I probably wouldn't do that until the methods or the technology has improved a little bit to where you can, get that to maybe 10 milliseconds or 20 milliseconds. But for what we're doing in the lab, I don't think that's really an issue. But some people like to do the audio visual synchronization. And I just don't think that that should be done online. Does anyone have questions?
I mean, this is very, very informative. This is great. Do you have more data about the options that we can give to the participants? What I'm wondering is, so these are probably the response delays and visual delays, and response delays probably were obtained from the button presses, like using key stuff, right? I'm wondering if we can get a continuous response, like, example, the visual world paradigm, they use mouse click, and then for the mouse click, they track the eye, the eye gaze.
Yep.
And there are also, I'm also thinking about the paper from Dan Pali lab. They use touchscreen based tablet pieces to record the finger movement trajectories. So I'm wondering if something like that is possible, and that's probably a way to resolve this kind of, the delay issues with the response.
Yeah, so Gorilla has a lot of these things in beta form, so they have mouse tracking available. But again, if you wanted to do a visual world experiment, that still requires you to synchronize the audio with the visual.
Exactly.
Like if you have the visual coming for the audio, that's not going to lead to good results. So I'm not sure, but I think that it's an empirical question.
How about because as I understood, you had to put the MP3 files for the auditory stimuli, right?
Yeah.
Is it possible to put the movie files, like, if you use movie files, then the audio and video must be synchronized if there's no problem. Because if you think about the technical, mechanistic, reasons that the delay happens is that if they have to present visual and auditory stimuli through a separated kind of route, then there can be problems with the synchronizations. But if it's more like a kind of pre-recorded video based, then it's probably okay, because then the whatever local terminal will download the video in their buffer, and then they play it from their local drum. Will be less problem. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I could see something. So like you're talking about maybe like a video of like the audio and the visual synced together.
Yeah.
I mean, that could work again. It just depends on what the browser, browser you're using. So there could be some variability with that, but that could work.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because you could play the audio, or you could play the video, and then you can just have the actual screen or the pictures up on the screen, and they can use like a mouse to click on whatever they want. Yeah, you could do that too. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if individuals have looked at that.
Okay, but I'm pretty sure that this is kind of evolving technique. So it's great that we are now trying to understand its limitations, and hopefully, this kind of technical glitches can be, resolved in the future.
Yeah, no, I definitely think. I mean, especially with technological advances, like these issues are going to get resolved to where we can get reasonable. And I mean, I think they're already pretty reasonable. I mean, for the stuff that we do, 80 milliseconds is not that bad.
This is not bad at all.
No. Definitely not. I mean, if we're talking about like a second or 2 seconds, then yeah, that'd be pretty bad. But I think it's okay.
Yeah, I think it's okay. Yeah.
So I guess the last question that I want to talk about, or I want to provide an answer to is: are there limitations to online data collection? And the answer to that is yes, of course. So you can't do everything that you want to do online.
Yeah.
You can't do eye tracking, although that's coming in the future. You can't do EEG. You can't do fMRI online. So there are things that you just won't be able to do online. So it's not your one-stop solution to everything that you want to do. But I definitely think that you're able to do lots of things online.
Okay.
I do have a demo of eye tracking online. So using your webcam. I don't know if people want to see that or if people have questions. We don't need to do that. So yeah, so final notes: stay home, wash your hands, don't touch your face, and collect data online. So thank you for coming to my TED Talk. So one thing that I kind of wanted to talk about, so one of the questions that I get from a lot of, auditory researchers is, can you do like adaptive staircase procedures online? So like PsychoPy, I don't think you can do that yet. And Gorilla, I don't think you can do that yet. But I talked to someone yesterday and they said that they've done it with JavaScript. So if you're really proficient at coding, then you can get like an adaptive staircase procedure for your experiment. But I don't have 3 weeks or a month or 2 months to learn a different coding language. With Gorilla or PsychoPy, you can literally create an experiment within a couple hours. Have it online. I don't have a month to create a script from scratch to do that. Maybe in the future it'll be easier. But for what we do, just presenting audio, stimuli, auditory stimuli, and just having them make responses, I think this is perfectly acceptable.
Yeah.
I don't see any issues with it.
Yeah. In many cases, those staircase type auditive procedure, they are just helpful to increase the efficiency of the getting data. I mean, like, we'll get to the result in the faster, in a shorter duration of time. I think in cases we can just replace with just my trial designs, like in lots of different conditions. We can then get some kind of equivalent result from that information from it. So I think it's not a big issue, but of course it'd be great if we can think about a nice way to also implement the adaptive procedure. That would be great too.
Yeah, I mean, I think
thanks so much. So this is so informative. This was great. Do you guys have any questions?
I mean, I really liked it too. I'm like, and also until the end of presentation, I was keep waiting for how then we can implement EEG, but Jason said no, you can't. That was the only bummer, but generally it was very good. Thank you very much.
So the only way that you'd be able to do that is if you could probably pretty soon you'll be able to interface Gorilla or PsychoPy with EEG, which I think already exists. So you could technically have them do it online, but they would have to come into the lab anyways.
One thing that I really like about this is that as we use this type of online platform to implement your experiment, you will have the instructions and directions, all these things much more seriously, because you know that you are not, I mean, actually, as an experimenter, you're not going to be there.
Yep, correct. Yeah, that's
right. So I think I've been super lazy in terms of putting those directions in the experiment, because I know that I will be there, so I can explain, verbally, but we cannot really expect that. So we'll try to put all those directions and all those training in the beginning and everything in a nice way. And this can be a really nice habit, even after we go back to the normal, not life. I think we want to keep this type of techniques to implement your experiment in the way that all the experiments can be automated. I think it's much more reliable way. It doesn't the skills of training and like giving directions and so on. So I think it's a nice way. I also thought about all those measures that's not been possible in this type of online platforms. One hybrid way will be something like no person like isolated site, and you can just occupy the time. And then once the time is kind of, so it's like a drive-through or some kind of curbside pickup type experiment. If you can recruit local people who can actually come to the physical location with all those equipments and devices, and if all the operations of devices can be automated, then just one person, the participant, just come in, finish the experiment, and then leave, and then maybe there can be some kind of kind of process in the middle of participants. And I mean, it's just maybe sounds like science fiction at this moment, but I think that's the hybrid way.
I think the possibilities are endless. And to go back, I didn't talk about as one of the limitations, but experimental control, right? You don't have experimental control with this. You're not there with them, observing their every movement. So they could have a browser. So everything is browser based. So it opens up in their browser. So they very realistically could be, watching Netflix, or they could be, shopping for shoes, and going back and forth between the experiment. And I don't know if there's anything implemented yet where there's like a browser lockdown, where like it locks down all the other browser features to where you can only look at that screen.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's been implemented yet, but I'm sure that's coming.
Great. So I actually already started thinking about then what was the possible experiments that we can implement. I mean, like right now, Jason, you already implemented ISNT, and we are doing that at CNC and EasyBio. I think there are a couple of other experiments that we can also bring to online. Like I've been thinking about the single-site deafness experiment. Vocoded speech in one ear and then natural speech in the other ear, and that's like an emulation of single-site deafness patients with a cochlear implant in the deafened ear. We had that planned for the SSD grant anyway, and I think that can easily go online. And also, I was also thinking about the queuing experiment that Megan and Jason implemented, and because we found that there was ceiling in the performance that we looked at from the in-person collected data, and we thought about running some further experiments to find out the sweet spot for the SNR to actually look at the effect of queuing, the speaker identity queuing in the speech and noise performance. I think that can also go online. I can also imagine lots of experiments that we wanna like finally implement, like eventually implement in the lab with EEG, can actually go online for the pilot part, or like preliminary part of the data collection, to find out the right signal to noise ratio, the right level of speech, or and so on. So I think there is lots of possibilities with this. So
and I definitely think that if you're not really sold on collecting data online, I think that this is definitely something, a platform where you can just pilot your data. So you want to get accuracy for things. Like you don't really want to use it. You just want to use it to help, create a better physical in-lab experiment.
Right.
This is great for that too.
Yeah. So the one part that I'm not 100% convinced yet is the individual differences approach. I know that Jason, you put the some kind of prelim screening auditory task in the beginning so that we can screen out any participants who are using very flimsy, low quality loudspeakers for the experiment. We want them to use the highest quality headphones as much as possible. If you think about the individual differences, then probably the differences in their performance can also come from the differences in the quality of the audio systems they have. But I don't worry about that at all if for any within subject design experiments. Like if you want to look at the effect of any experimental manipulations on the stimuli, then I think online is totally fine. And even the variance, is even a good thing, because then you get an effect size in a noisy situation. So that's even a good thing. But I think there is also a resolution even for those individual differences analysis. Maybe we can ask them to take a picture of their audio equipment, and we can analyze the quality based on the information that we can get from those pictures or model names, or right. So
I have a screener questionnaire question at the end of the experiments, and ask them like what headphones are they using, like the brand. So that's one way.
Yeah.
And I didn't talk about this, but with a lot of the platforms, so like Gorilla or Prolific, you can actually you can exclude or include like various like requirements, like technological requirements. So you can implement criteria that they have to be on like Firefox browser, a Mac, and like they have headphones, or like so I don't know if they have specific headphone models or if you can even do that, but that could be in the future where you can actually select people based on like their headphone equipment that they're using. So I think it's something that's coming, or something that might be possible for us to do. I mean, nothing is perfect in life, and nothing is perfect in science. So the headphone screener that I use, like it's just what we have at this moment that's reasonable, that some other speech perception folks have been using. So
but you get nothing unless you try anything, right? So I mean, so I think it's great. So thanks a lot, Jason. Again.
Jason, you can think like Inyo just said, like we cannot control just technical things, but like maybe we can statistically control for after when we analyze.
Exactly. So like, that's good that we ask them like what headphones they're using, because then we can we can categorize them into like really great quality headphones and then poor quality Walgreens headphones. And then in the model, for sure.
If you're super serious about those, because as Bob mentioned in the meeting in the morning, the audiology folks tend to be quite rigorous about the auditory calibrations and devices and so on. I think we can even think about some kind of test kits and kind of hardware kits that we can just deliver to our participants. And then we can rely on those participants over and over. Like Jason already mentioned that in the mechanical Turk, like M-Turk, there is some kind of super participant type thing. Kind of qualified professional experiment participants and subjects. And maybe we can build a community of those like golden ear and also kind of high quality audio participants and kind of qualified participants in terms of the quality of their devices.
Did you call them golden ear? I was like, that's a great name for those participants. Golden ear. I don't know.
Anyway, sounds great.
Listeners, experienced listeners. But I mean, I think for what we're doing, I think that this is perfectly, is acceptable and reasonable. We're not having them do anything, technical or things that require like really great audio equipment. Again, I would be a little bit more reserved if we're doing something a little bit more technical, like presenting, certain sounds in one ear versus the other, stuff like that. That would require a little bit more testing and piloting, I think.
Right. Unless other people have questions, I had just one last question. Jason, have you seen anything like iOS or Android-based platform for this type of online testing?
I have. So there is actually a platform out. It's specifically for your phone. It's for physical experiments.
Okay.
So it's really like WebOS or iPhone, Android, where you can do psychophysical experiments on there.
Okay.
And it's apparently really great. I could send that to you if you're interested in that.
Yeah, please, because I'm interested in that, especially because of even better response options that we can give if we know that they are using those kind of touchscreen devices.
The issue is though is that like the auditory system is often left out, right? So it's mostly also all visual. Because
but if they use headphones, and if it's not the later versions of iPhones that does not have like headphone ports, then and I think we can still control that. So yeah, thanks so much.
I don't know if Anne has anything to add. I mean, she's been working on this online stuff too, and has experience with it because I've tormented her with piloting. I don't know if you have any input or anything to say.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's nice to like the collaborator work. That's really helpful because this is new for all of us. So being able to know what it sounds like in the lab and what it should sound like and what's going wrong, or kind of being able to test it before you implement it. But I think to In-Young's point about like testing things, like piloting for signal to noise ratio or stuff like that, this is so much faster than us trying to just get like 10 people in the lab, right? So that has a tremendous value in saving us time. Even if there's a little bit of a translation you have to do, it's still super helpful.
Yeah, because we can have an answer in a day.
Right.
But if we're in the lab, we have to wait like 3 weeks or 4 weeks for an answer, which
it's funny that I have so many experiences of getting pilot results from just 5 people, and then like so excited. Okay, so let's collect data from 30 people, and then turns out that no, the pilot data was just a lot, right? So that happens a lot, but this can be a nice solution in those cases.
And I talked about collecting 250 people in a day. For ISN't, I put the experiment up last Thursday, and 50 people signed up within a couple hours.
Wow.
So
great.
I mean, it's super fast.
Jason,
Yeah.
do you see the future of research going more online?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Even after COVID, just for efficiency and diversity reasons?
Yeah, I think so. So, I mean, realistically, I'm not sure when students are going to get back into the classroom. And a lot of, and then maybe not so much for In-Young, because you usually just pull from like the hospital community for the most part. But for other experimenters, we usually rely on undergrads. So, I mean, there's really no other option than online. And I mean, I just think that's the way it's going. I think online classes are going to be the way of the future. There's not going to be really many physical colleges anymore, I don't think. But that's just my opinion, I think. I definitely think that things are going to go more online.
Even long term?
Yeah, I think so. That's what I think. Maybe I'm wrong, but it just makes sense, especially with the growing population and more people going to college. But In-Young maybe has a more informed opinion, being faculty and having those conversations.
I think Jason is right. I think there, even after the COVID situation is done, I think there will be a new norm. And I think I can easily imagine the new norm will involve lots of more online stuff, because I think people are actually realizing that, oh, this was actually not bad. Of course, this is bad, but people are also realizing that some, good aspects of this online stuff, like Jason really clearly demonstrated that in the beginning. So I think there will be much greater amount of online experiments and studies in the future. I can easily imagine.
Yeah, because like you said, even with ISN't already, you have 50 new pilot subjects, whereas that would have taken weeks if we were in person. So
I think Anne and I tried to collect data for like
months.
Yeah.
So
it's really awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, then the data looked pretty good. I showed In-Young some preliminary data, and
it looked great.
Yeah, and it looked good. So
yeah.
From the perspective of a broke undergrad college student, so you said you pay these participants just through this website, and so it's anyone. So like even I can sign up.
And I've recommended this to folks too. So if you're interested in it, it's Amazon MTurk or Prolific. You can sign up and participate in studies and get money.
What's the form of payment that they get? Is it like PayPal or just?
Yeah, I think it's PayPal, or if you have like a debit card, you get it sent there.
Oh, nice.
There's lots of people doing it, so like you'd have to be really professional if you wanted to make a living off of it. Yeah. But if you just want like 10 or 15, 20 bucks, you can do this for some extra cash.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I'm seeing people like $15 an hour. So.
Online.
What was that, Subong?
No, I just said like I'm gonna invite Megan online for my new experiment from Purdue.
Oh yeah, do it.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Nah.
nice also it's not like a gift card. So
Yes.
it's like real money.
You're not entered into a drawing for Amazon.
Yeah.
No, you get paid. So yeah, for reference, I pay people about $15 an hour for Isn't, or something like that online. So they get $30 or $40 for doing the 2 experiments or the 2 sessions. So
Yeah, I might be looking into that.
yeah, and I get people emailing me saying that they're so disappointed that they can't participate.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's great.
Win-win.
Yeah.
Yeah, so folks looking for extra money, go to Prolific, go to MTurk, make a little cash.
Awesome.
Help researchers out during this horrible, horrible time.
Okay. So anything else from audience? Maybe then, and do you want to continue recording even for the journal club part, or what do you think?
Yeah, I might start a new recording just so it doesn't
Okay.
take years to download.
Okay. So let's start recording for this one
Yeah.
right now, and then let's move on to the next part.
Okie dokie.